Hello and welcome to week 7 of Introduction to Data Science. So last week was all about web scraping and programming. We learned about how to scrape data from a single web page using functions from the Harvest package. And then we learned about writing functions and using functions like the map function and its variants. We learned about how to apply that function across multiple pages to create a giant data frame that contains data from all of the pages that we scraped. In the code along last week, we applied what we learned to get information on the speeches from First Minister Nicola Sturgeon on her daily COVID-19 briefings. And we also mentioned during the code along that we'll be taking another look at this data at the end of the semester when we work on text analysis. One of the pieces of feedback from this week's quiz was that we're still a little bit confused about the map function. So I want to do a very brief overview of them again. And I strongly recommend for those of you who are still grappling with that idea to watch the last video on iteration from last week, as well as go over the code along recording as well, since we actually put it to use there and I walk through the various stages of how we built a map function. So the map functions, well, there is a single map function that you can use, but usually we use the variants where it's map underscore whatever the output type is. So DFR for data frame, and when we're constructing it by rows, that's what the R stands for. But if you want the output to be logical, then you would use, for example, map underscore LGL for logical. So we have map underscore whatever the output type we want is, and then in the parentheses we give this map function 2 arguments. We can actually give more as well, but we've stuck to the situation where things are a bit simpler, where we're just giving it a list of what to map over and then also the function to map. And in the case that we worked with over the last week, this was a function that we actually wrote. So the examples that we work through in terms of web scraping look something like this, where we're constructing a data frame. So that was map underscore DFR. We give it a list of URLs. Usually we've scraped this information from the web page as well, but we have a list of the URLs that we want our map function to go hit one by one, and then we have the function to scrape this page that we constructed. So for example, for the lab you're working on that's due tomorrow, you're going to be looking at the list of URLs for the almost 300 or so pages from the University of Edinburgh art collection, and then the function to scrape is the function you wrote based off of the code you developed on scraping a single page that basically gives us information on 10 art pieces at a time from each of the pages. In a slightly different situation, might seem more simple or less simple depending on how you look at it. We also gave examples of the other map variants just to kind of build up some intuition around how the map function works. So for example, if you have a list of number vectors and you want to find the mean of each of these. So the example we gave in the video was, what if you have scores from, say, exam 1 and exam 2 of a class? So these are 2 vectors, and then you put them in a list, and then you apply the mean function to them. That's basically like saying hit every element of that list, so the scores of exam 1 and then scores of exam 2, and then find their mean, for example. We also had the course, mid-semester course feedback last week, so I'd like to summarize a few of the points from that. So in terms of the things that you like, the organization of the materials seemed to be good, which I'm really glad to hear about. People seem to like the introds.org page and how you can access everything in one place there. The videos you also seem to be enjoying, which is great to hear. Workshops and teamwork is also getting highlighted. I know that some of you have had struggles with the idea of how are we going to do teamwork in an online environment, and I think that struggle is continuing. It is not easy, but I'm really glad to hear that you're finding that workshop experience to be a positive about the course as well. And the code alongs have also gotten a lot of mentions, and I know that a big chunk of you are attending the code alongs weekly. Some of you are more vocal during it than others, but either way you're attending, and that's great. But I also know that there's a smaller subset of you who haven't been showing up to them. So some of you might just be watching the videos, which is good. But one of the things that got mentioned in the course feedback survey is that it also forms a sense of community. The liveliness of it is also kind of satisfactory to students. So even if you have been watching the videos, if you happen to be free at that time, which hopefully you are, if you don't have another class at that time, I would recommend considering joining live, not just because it's an opportunity for you to also ask questions as well. And you don't have to speak up in a larger crowd. You can also just use the chat, but also because of what others mentioned in terms of, feeling like you're part of a community during that time, which unfortunately this year we're having to be able to get less and less of with the remote teaching. The student hours have also gotten lots of mentions, and I know that some of you have been diligently attending them and getting lots and lots out of them. And then others of you choose other venues like Piazza to ask your questions, which is absolutely fine. But I would recommend trying to make it to either my or David's student hours. And also remember that we've added now math space hours for the course, so you might consider those as well. So think of any of those as live opportunities, and those of you who have been attending them have mentioned that they have been really a positive experience. So some of you haven't tried them at all, so I'd recommend that you give that a try. And finally, this got mentioned not as many times as the others, so that's why I have the asterisk there. But those who have mentioned it said that they have learned a lot from the interactive art tutorials and have enjoyed that experience. So these are listed at the very bottom of each of the weekly pages, and I wonder if the fact that they're at the bottom of it means that not many of you scroll as far down, but they basically walk you through the data examples that we are going to use on your homeworks, which I think are some of the more challenging aspects of the course, since you're working on them on your own, and they're a little bit lengthier since they happen every other week. So they're not only good preparation for the homework, but the fact that they have automated feedback built in means that as you're typing code and testing it out, you have some not just our errors that you encounter if you make a mistake, but actually feedback that we have written for you. And so I would recommend more of you to be giving them a try. And as an aside, those interactive art tutorials were built over the summer by myself, but also along with 2 other students who have taken the course last year. So it can also be an example for you of like, what are the sorts of things that you could be doing after this course. They are written in an R package called Learn R, but they basically leverage R Markdown, which you're learning about anyway. And just knowing that fellow students wrote those might actually be motivating for you to give them a try. And the fact that they're the ones who develop the feedback for it means that they've already gone through these homework assignments and developed some feedback that they thought would be useful for students at your level. Things that you want to see changes in. One of you only, but I think it's still worthwhile to mention that all videos, mention that some of the videos don't have subtitles. That should not be the case. That's definitely not my intention. I will mention that on Media Hopper, the subtitling is not automatic. So I actually have to go and click an additional button for that to happen. All the YouTube videos should be subtitled automatically. So if you are seeing that a video is missing subtitles, just let me know as soon as possible and I'll rectify that situation, which probably means maybe I forgot to push that additional button after I uploaded it. Workshop length. You have mentioned that the hour is too short, and I completely understand why that is feeling that way. I think the reasoning for the school to be scheduling them an hour at a time was to say, well, 2-hour online meetings seem too long, but at the same time, we didn't want to cut back on the exercises that you're working on, because that would honestly be cutting back on your learning. You know, this course was delivered with a 2-hour weekly workshop last year, and just because we went to online doesn't mean you should be getting half the content. So even though the workshop length is an hour, I really want to reiterate this thing that I've said over and over, and we mentioned in the lab exercises as well. You are not expected to finish during the workshop. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that still makes it challenging for us to get together as a team to finish the exercises. I think that for those teams where you're thinking an hour is simply not enough, we need the additional hour, I would very strongly encourage you to think about them as 2-hour workshops. Yes, you do need to hop over to Microsoft Teams in the middle or some other platform. I thought about being able to keep the Zoom sessions open, but there's some technical challenges that come with the size of the class and how many breakout groups Zoom allows you to have within a given session, that I can't just get everyone into one giant Zoom session and say, all right, for the next 3 hours, you can just work here. So you will need to unfortunately hop off of Zoom, which is where you can get the immediate tutor attention, which many of you have mentioned is a good thing. But I encourage you to think about them as 2-hour workshops if you think that's what would help your team to structure things, and then just hop over there and continue working for the following hour. Another thing that got mentioned was posting some of the materials earlier in the week. For the videos, I will try my best. I do record these on a weekly basis, and it's always a little bit finicky to get them right and get them up there, but I will try my best to post them a little bit earlier. In terms of the labs, I certainly can do that. So we'll try to move up the posting of the labs to an earlier time. The videos, one thing I will mention is that they're meant to replace the what would have been in-person lectures. So by the Friday, we expect you to watch the videos. This is similar to saying if this was an in-person class with workshops on Friday, by Friday, we would have expected you to show up to 2 classes, maybe on a Monday and a Wednesday. So on one hand, I completely sympathize with the requests and will try my best. But on the other hand, the expectation is that you're consuming these during the week anyway. And then one other thing that, I've gotten feedback both ways, and I think we're just kind of perhaps going to leave things as is the lengths of the videos. So some of you have actually asked for longer but fewer videos, like what would have been basically the lecture perhaps. So we would maybe have 2 videos per week but longer. And some of you said that you like the experience of shorter videos, but even if there were more of them to cover the same content. Given that you're of 2 minds, and I feel like I've fallen into a rhythm of what the video lengths can be, I think I'm going to keep things as similar as possible to what we've been doing so far. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that on YouTube especially, I'm able to add chapters really easily. So you can think about those chapter markers, and sometimes you need to just expand the information for a given video. You can think about those chapter markers as though they were cutoff points for shorter videos. So if you are of the mind that you prefer shorter and more videos, you can think about consuming the videos a chapter at a time as well. And also with shorter videos, I understand that it makes it easier to come back to a particular concept. I think those chapter markers will be very helpful for that as well. A couple other announcements for the week. So last week you completed your project proposals, and this week, if you would like, optionally, you can do a reproposal of your project. What does that mean? I've given you some feedback, and I am going to be finishing giving feedback to teams throughout the day today, or at least by tomorrow morning. So you should review those as a team and think about, really, if you are thinking about doing a reproposal, taking an hour as a team to knock that out. This is not meant to be a whole other process where you're going through the whole thing. I anticipate that for most teams, I'm not suggesting that you overhaul the whole thing, but instead you tweak it and make it deeper and better, so that it can be a lot easier for you to actually work on the project later. So optionally, if you choose to work on this, I would recommend setting aside an hour or so as a team together to knock it out. I have opened multiple issues, so one real issue per GitHub issue. And I've also walked you through in the kind of the overall issue where I have your score and overall feedback, the process of closing issues with commits. So when you write a commit message, you can say closes and then give the number of the issue. So you do the hashtag and then the number of the issue, so that you can actually get used to this, very realistic data science workflow of making a change and then closing a particular issue that was raised with a commit that made the change. When you're done, ping me which means that you can tag me on the issue. You can just add me on the GitHub issue and say we're done, and then I'll basically change the permissions for your project one more time to review it and then open it back up again. The deadline is 4 p.m. on Friday UK time. That's 6th of November. And finally, this week we're going to be talking about data science ethics. The deadlines are here on the outline. As you can see, we have our usual lab. We have a peer evaluation deadline on Wednesday. Especially if you haven't done it last time, please make sure that you take just a few minutes to do your peer evaluation. And then, as I mentioned, if you do want to do the reproposal for your project, that's due Friday. But in terms of the content for this week, we're going to be touching on something highly important, data science ethics, and we probably should be spending a whole semester on this as opposed to a week. And we have been interviewing, this idea of the ethics of what we're learning about throughout the weeks as well. But I thought it's important to set aside an actual week to it where we can really get deeper into it. And I've structured the conversation in around 3 topics: misrepresentation of data and results, data privacy, and algorithmic bias. And for each one of these, I'm making a brief video that covers kind of the highlights and things that that I want to draw your attention to. And then I've also added guest lectures, if you will, from experts in each one of these areas. And there are many more, but I had to be selective, respecting that you have limited time to spend on the course after all. But I do hope that you'll get a chance to watch all of those additional talks as well. I think they're not only highly important, but also highly accessible. So not super technical talks, just covering important technical points that actually have ethical implications. So I hope you enjoy the module, and for each of the videos, I'm also ending them with some further recommendations for reading. These are not things that I expect you will read for this class necessarily within the context of this semester. But hey, if you're looking for some holiday reading for when the semester is over, those might be things that you might want to follow on. Right, have a great week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the live sessions this week.